My name is Wida and I run Resolution Management. I have with me today strategies here for handling a difficult conversation. This is in your workbook on page 5. It's also in your, right? You'll feel much more in control when you're prepared. You're able to cope with your own emotions and anticipate the other person's emotions when you prepare. You'll really hopefully be very tactful in your communication because you would have thought it out. Some people go as far as scripting it out. You don't have to script, but I would say put a few bullet points, summary points that you want to make sure that you cover. Again, contributing to you feeling confident in the conversation, and again, be prepared for possible responses. Managing, congratulations. That's a big change in your life. I certainly can hear that, income is going to be maybe something that you're worried about or you're concerned about. And then I might say, my role as your supervisor is to give you feedback, and help you to succeed here. Tell me about how you're perceiving your role and your success or your effectiveness in your role. And let them talk a little bit more, but this is where that preparation and having your bullet points, if you will, on very factual information around that person's lack of performance. Sometimes people feel like, oh, I don't want to tell him or her exactly what we're going to talk about because then maybe they're going to do what? They're going to prepare. And you want them to be prepared because if not, they're going to want to have another conversation again because the first conversation they weren't prepared, right? So you need to let people know in a general sense what it is that we need to talk about. And then we talked a little bit about the physicality, where you want to sit. Again, a cross can be very confrontational. Sitting catty-cornered is better. Perhaps, depending on the situation, maybe somewhere informal, or it could be at a conference room, or it could be in a break room if there's privacy, because that's really very important. We have to preserve confidentiality and make sure that the place is private. And then we don't want to talk too much around the subject. We want to get to the point. So again, on page 12 and 13, we have some things to do during the stage 4, which is carrying out the conversation, listening and responding. So important that you're clear, specific, and that you focus on the facts. What can be really helpful is to have examples. And the more concrete you can be with those examples, the more effective your point will be made, right? So being able to not really talk about feelings, but more talk about facts. And make sure that you are providing accurate information and be sincere. I think our sincerity speaks volumes, and we demonstrate it in our body language and in our tone. So be sincere, and be willing to ask questions. I talked about it earlier. Adopt that curious mindset. Like, what made you think that? Or tell me more about how you saw that, to get them to talk. And then let the other person ask you questions. And if you can't answer, be honest about that and maybe offer a rationale why you can't. Right? So, again, thinking about your body language, being very self aware, right? Your facial expressions. Try not to be distracted. Don't respond to telephone messages or texts unless it's something really critical. And if you have to, disclose that in the beginning of the conversation. I might be getting a text that I have to really respond to, so please excuse me if I have to, but it's only going to be for a moment. Something like that. And ask them to do the same. Sometimes people don't, again, realize how dismissive it is when someone picks up their cell phone when you're talking to them and is responding. So set some guidelines or some ground rules for the conversation. And one of which is don't please, for the next 30 minutes, refrain from using your cell phone. Take responsibility when it's warranted. I think people think that admitting mistakes is a weakness, and it's actually not. It's a strength. And when we are confident in ourselves, we can admit a mistake because everyone makes mistakes, and you become more human when you say, hey, you know what, I didn't realize that came off that way, or I didn't realize I didn't have all the information. Be humble, be willing to admit mistakes. And if you can, try to reframe the situation in a positive light, but you don't want to do that um, kind of in a trite way. Like, everything's going to be fine. Be genuine, but try to reframe so that the person has a sense of encouragement at the end of the conversation. So, the first thing is to prepare yourself. Do not go into these conversations cold. You need to spend some time thinking about their reaction, thinking about what you're going to say, thinking about what it is that you really want, right? Because that's the second thing. Make sure you know what you want to achieve. Sometimes if we're not clear about knowing what we want to achieve, we're not going to achieve it, right? So, do you want acknowledgement? Do you want an apology? Do you want the person just to think about this a little bit more? Do you want the person to take an action, or do you want them just to think more or do something differently? There's a difference there. Choosing the right time and place. Very important consideration for the success of the conversation. So, are you going to set the meeting first thing in the morning because you're fresh? You need to think about the other person too. Are they the kind of person that's going to be focused first thing in the morning? Some people aren't good until they have at least a cup of coffee. So maybe you should wait. Timing is important. Um, Deliver the message promptly and clearly. Sometimes, again, we might want to beat around the bush a little bit because we're uncomfortable with the conversation, so we might be hemming and hawing a little bit. Try to get to the point and get to it quickly for the conversation to be successful, and be clear. Uh, Focus on the facts and tell the truth. Know what the facts are. So, in that situation, for example, the first one, you're not approved. What I saw Susan do is she had the facts. You just gave me this request a couple of days ago. Commencement is next week. We need you for commencement. Just know your facts and speak the truth. Try to understand the situation from the other person's point of view. Again, same situation. Somebody might have booked, they got some great deal for a cruise and they booked it for their family of four, and they could never go on a vacation, and this was some special deal. Try to empathize with the person. Try to understand things from their point of view. Try not to take people's reactions personally, because it's more about them than it is about you. They're not getting what they want, and so they're going to do things that are going to put pressure on you. Try not to take it personally and realize that you're a professional. This conversation is not going to be forever, right? We're going to close this conversation in a respectful manner, and that it's going to be okay. Stay calm and manage your feelings. So, again, that's talking a little bit about preparation. How do you feel about this person? What is your relationship like? What's at risk here if this conversation does not go well? The difference here, and it's important to acknowledge the difference between hearing and listening. Right? So, hearing, involuntary, accidental, and effortless. Listening is intentional, it's voluntary, and it's focused. So you really have to stop talking, concentrate, show understanding and acceptance, and try to restate or paraphrase what the person said. Right? So here are some options that you might consider instead of those other statements. Again, this must come as a surprise. It looks as if you're feeling, I'm so sorry, but I won't be able to. I can understand why you're feeling that way. There's something that I need to tell you, this kind of thing. It's your tone as well as the words that you use. Let's now talk about dealing with emotions. And I'm talking about the emotions of the other person. Okay? So I'm going to have you partner with someone. You can partner with the person right next to you. So that's a little bit about coping with difficult responses in conversations. Let's move on to stage 5, which is exploring alternatives and solutions. So, first of all, before we go into exploring alternatives, we want to make sure that we're understanding the problem in the same way. And I think just restating your understanding of what it is that we're trying to discuss and resolve is one way to do that. We talked about trying to see the concern from the other person's perspective, maybe letting them know this is what I understand your position is on this can help. Empathy. And then sometimes we need to step back because sometimes those conversations become overwhelming. And if you're feeling that you're not in that moment able to move forward in a positive way, it's really best to say, I need some time to think more about this. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because if you're not feeling clear with your communication, then you will likely not get what your needs are. You won't get your needs met in that conversation. So stepping away is sometimes the best thing to do. Again, I'm on page 16. Keep an open mind. You know, even though some ideas may seem unreasonable or untenable, maybe there's a part of that idea that can be leveraged in a different way. So listen for some potential in a solution that you might disagree with, right? We're always looking for what we call win-win solutions. So that's a little bit about coping with difficult responses in conversations. Let's move on to stage 5, which is exploring alternatives and solutions. So, first of all, before we go into exploring alternatives, we want to make sure that we're understanding the problem in the same way. And I think just restating your understanding of what it is that we're trying to discuss and resolve is one way to do that. We talked about trying to see the concern from the other person's perspective, maybe letting them know this is what I understand your position is on this can help. Empathy. And then sometimes we need to step back because sometimes those conversations become overwhelming. And if you're feeling that you're not in that moment able to move forward in a positive way, it's really best to say, I need some time to think more about this. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because if you're not feeling clear with your communication, then you will likely not get what your needs are. You won't get your needs met in that conversation. So stepping away is sometimes the best thing to do. Thank you. Engaging. Inquisitive. Productive. Still thinking. Okay, absolutely. You're right. Informative. Effective. Okay. Helpful. Collaborative. Wonderful. And eye-opening. Thanks, everybody. Say it again. Hyphenated. Folks, I'm Weta Ventures. It's been an honor and a privilege to be with you today. Thanks so much for your time. And I look forward to working with you again in the weeks ahead.